Good evening, everybody. We're here for this library renewal information session, and we've been holding them every single month. So the first Tuesday of the month in the evening at 7 p.m., we have these sessions. If this is your first session, welcome. For some of you, it's your second or third session. We cover different stuff every time because it really depends on the questions that people ask. We also have weekly chats with the director. So every single week, I meet with patrons and we sign up for one-on-one sessions. And that really gives people the opportunity to ask questions that they may not feel comfortable asking in a group setting. So just a reminder to you as well that if you leave tonight's session and have more questions or questions that you would prefer to be answered one-on-one, we can do that as well. So who is here tonight? So I'm here. So I'm Eugenia Shatov. I'm the library director. We also have Eric Sharon, the library board president. We have Paul Mays, principal, Butler Roland Mays Architects, and Dominic Calgi, president, Calgi Construction Management. So in addition to Dominic, we also have David and Eric, part of Dominic's team. You didn't quite make it onto the slide, but thank you for being here as well. So we brought together our entire team to be able to answer as many questions as you have and to provide you with the most accurate and factual information possible. So the big question is, who are we today? So the Pearl River Public Library is part of a library consortium called RCLS. It has 47 member libraries, and compared to the other libraries within the system, we're open more than 75% of them. Last year, we ranked third in total program attendance. We had over 23,000 attendees. We have the 10th highest circulation at 152,000 items. Program attendance has increased over 63% since 2003. The number of programs we offer has increased 23% since 2018. That's over 1,000 events annually. And circulation went up 9.9% from the previous year. One thing that I can say that we're very proud of is even through COVID, we've managed to reimagine our programs and have been able to keep our program attendance very, very steady. We had last month over 2,600 residents attending programs offered by us online. So we, about a year and a half ago, ran a campaign to ask people what they loved about their library. And so we had people write out these little love notes, and you might have seen them hanging up throughout the library. We also took people's pictures. And so here's some of our favorite quotes. Mary said, "It's my life support. It's the life of the community and its patrons." Stephen said, "It's the perfect place to study, go on the internet, make copies and write papers. I made the Dean's List at RCC the last 4 semesters because of the library." And then Erin finishes it off with, "It's a space for everyone, a place to learn anything, a way station and a destination." So the warm sentiment that most people feel for the library is something that we certainly encourage, and something that we pride ourselves in serving our community, because we know we're so loved by our community and we want to be able to serve you guys in the best way possible. So to give you an example of the many information gathering sessions we've had in the past few years, we've had several town hall meetings going back to 2019, 2020. We've had different committee meetings, the chat with the director sessions, public information sessions, and this is something that we've committed to try to get the word out about the project. We are a public library, and we do not have a huge, marketing or social media department, but we do recognize that we want to have our residents informed, and so we've committed to do these information sessions and information gathering sessions to hear from all of you. So why go through the master planning process? So most public institutions and public buildings go through master planning processes for a number of reasons. They go through them to evaluate their programs, their services, their mission. And for us, that was certainly part of it. But the biggest reason that we went through the master planning process was because we knew that systems within the building were failing. So you can see this poster. We actually have it on display in the front of the library right now. Last year, we averaged over $9,300 a month in Bandaids. Unfortunately, this year it will be more. And what we're talking about when we talk about Bandaids is that we haven't had any capital improvements to the building since the last construction was complete in 1991. So when we're talking about Bandaids, we're talking about the rental AC unit that we have for 4 to 6 months throughout the year. We're talking about the temporary patches that we make to the roof and the ceiling tile, the temporary patches to the floor. We're talking about the temporary repairs we make to electric consistently. In the last month alone, we had to make almost $20,000 worth of repairs to our boiler. Our heat has been on the fritz. And as the building continues to deteriorate, these costs only go up. So we knew from the beginning, as we embarked upon this master planning process, that there would be significant changes that we would have to make to the facility to address these issues. And so this infographic that you see right in front of you provides examples of those $93 a month Band-Aids that we're currently spending month after month. So the second reason that we underwent the master facility planning process was we really wanted feedback from the public. So we had a couple of surveys that went out. We had a DOT exercise that had over 1,100 respondents. And so we asked for two things. We asked for people's opinions on how they wanted space allocated or reallocated. And then we also asked them about different resources and the importance of certain aspects of the resources in the building. So one thing that you can see, which on the left hand, that was certainly surprising to us, was the cafe/coffee bar. 27% of respondents wanted one. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to have one, but I am saying that that is an interesting piece of information that we hadn't really considered and hadn't thought of until it was presented as a survey option for people, and they responded that they wanted one. It makes sense when you think about the way that people use libraries now. Most people come to the library, certainly pre-COVID, and then once all the vaccines are out, people will come back to the library for extended periods of time. But the way in which people use the library, interact with the library, people spend extended periods of time at the library. They do want a place to be able to snack or whatnot. So that was understandable to us. In terms of on the right-hand side, the resource discussion, the single biggest complaint that we had was about parking. So respondents were not happy with the number of public parking spots. They weren't happy about the competition for spots in front of the building. And so these were all things that we wanted to take into consideration when we thought about what we would or could do with the existing library building. So what were the findings of the master facility planning process? Many of the findings were very surprising to us in a number of different ways. So the immediate issues that became apparent, that are issues right now, every single day, included the HVAC, the roof, the floor, the electric, accessibility issues, meeting rooms, and parking. So the next couple of slides, I'm going to go into some of those issues and provide you with some examples and some pictures to show you how all of these issues kind of snowball into larger issues that are all interrelated. So when we're talking about the HVAC, we're talking about the heating, the ventilation, and the air conditioning. And so one of the biggest problems in the building is the humidity. So we do have water in the building, especially during the summer months. If you've been in the library, you see the carpet buckle. It becomes an issue not just for comfort, it becomes an issue for health, for safety, for our physical book collections. The relative humidity in the building in the summertime goes up to 90%. So when you think about, 50 being considered comfortable, the fact that our library is the equivalent of a sauna or a rainforest climate, the system and the building is not meant to be able to handle that, and it becomes extremely uncomfortable and detrimental to the surfaces. There are slick surfaces. There's a lot of water damage that occurs anywhere where there isn't enough ventilation. And so that's something that we constantly battle, and we need to make sure that any solution that we have addresses the constant water in the building. Another example of the problems with the HVAC was the catastrophic failure of the chillers. So we have the big chiller rental unit. We have 2 non-functioning chillers currently in the mechanical space, and they simply do not work. They are piped into our existing systems, which are extremely inefficient. And so they do work, but it's extremely expensive for a season. And it's something that we've been doing for several years now. Another issue is the water tower. So we have a water tower on the roof that is now decommissioned. The location of it was brought under concern because it was so close to some of the intake for the system. And so we have a defunct water tower on the roof. The age of the systems themselves, so we're talking about the AC and the heat, are so old. The furnace is from 1963, so it's original to the building. When you consider energy efficiency or the way in which new systems run, you can't even compare. The controls in the zones are inappropriate, so there's no way to regulate temperature within the building. We have vast parts of the library that are on the same zone. So an example would be the fact that the area behind the circulation desk is on the same zone as the area where the reference desk is. So there's no temperature control that can be reached between those 2 areas because they're on the same zone. The biggest problem that you can really see next time you come to the library is that the duct work throughout the building, which is kind of seen as contributing to the architecture of the building, was improperly insulated and treated. And so what occurred was during the installation, there was loose insulation and batting stapled into the inside of the ducts. And so now it's loose and deteriorated to the point where it comes out of all of the vents. And so you see black vents everywhere. And sometimes we joke that it's snowing because it looks like it's snowing ash, because we have all this insulation that is black, that is breaking down, that is coming out of all of the vents. So to show you some examples, so here are the chillers. The older chiller is on the left. The quote unquote newer chiller from the 80s is on the right. Neither of them is currently functioning. You can see on the left, we have the air handler. It has a almost like cookie sheet underneath the unit. The bottom of the unit is completely rusted out, and it has no bottom, so it's constantly sucking in air from the mechanical room, but then also leaking condensation through the floor. So we have a cookie sheet underneath it that tries to catch the piping that you see. On the right, you can see part of the AC, the equipment on the roof that no longer functions. And then in terms of the duct work, you can see on the left, we've got the front lobby area, which doesn't have working heat, and the bathroom also, the picture of the bathroom in the middle. None of the bathrooms have really good working heat. We did install some electric type heaters to try to get the heat to work, but they work semi-successfully, not consistently. But on the left-hand picture, you can really see that run of ductwork up above, and that's the ductwork that we see throughout the library. And all of it has that black, dirty, disintegrating insulation inside of it. And then to give you an example, the right-hand picture of that closet area, there's areas within the library that don't have proper ventilation. And so because of the humidity, it really creates an issue in terms of air movement and prevention of mold and of the humidity kind of seeping into everything. It's another example of how poor the air circulation and ventilation is. So the roof is another example of an issue that continues to bother us as it continues to break down. It was improperly built from the beginning. We have engineering reports and final reports from the 91 renovation that state that the roof was already pooling, that the little drains that were placed in the roof were above the lowest points of the roof, so they weren't catching all of the water, and the tilt and the incline of the roof is such that the roof is never ever getting fully dry. Our custodians, whenever we have several pumps, so when it rains hard, our custodians go out there and put the pumps out to move the water to try to get them into the drain. When more recently, within the past 15 to 20 years, the roof was resealed, it was improperly resealed. So we are getting water pooling, freezing, gathering, and it's not running off. We had an engineering report that confirmed that there was less than 2 years left of life on the roof. And we see it with the leaking, we see it with the pooling, we see it with everything else. So you can see some examples of the roof. If you ever look at us from Google, from the satellite, from the satellite imagery, we always have water on our roof. So if you look at picture number, we have 5 photos here. If you look at picture number 5, that's actually the area above the public bathrooms. And that is the worst of all. As you can see from the water in the picture, that's the area that we have most concerns about. There's a lot of ice damming and water pooling, and that's the area we're concerned is going to go first. It's totally flat. So the floor, as you've seen, the carpet needs to be replaced. But in addition to just redoing a carpet, the wet and the damp that comes out makes the floor, because it's a concrete floor, wet. And so there's no way to address it unless there's a way to address it through construction or a pump or something. The floor is on concrete. There's absolutely no insulation, and with the foundation settling, there are several areas of the library where there are significant cracks and humps, and so that becomes a tripping hazard and is something that we absolutely need to address, not only from a safety perspective, but also from a foundational perspective. We have several large humps in the building, the largest being in the community at this point in the community room. So the electric, with the upgrade of the HVAC, we do need to upgrade the electric. The electric throughout the building is completely insufficient. Our building was built pre-internet. So when you think about the requirements that were needed of a public library that was designed in the 1980s, our needs have completely changed. And so the panels, the access to outlets, the lighting, all of that needs a complete and utter overhaul. I don't know if you can see on the left-hand picture, it's just showing the location of a panel and the fact that we don't have enough. The picture on the right shows actually a patron had plugged in their phone. So this happens quite often, even though we do have separate charging stations, because we are all so digitally and electronically connected. People need outlets. We don't have enough outlets anywhere. And any sort of changes that we make to the electric, such as adding a workspace or adding a computer, necessitates more electrical work. So we do spend money annually trying to make things work as they are and retrofit things as we come up with new uses for parts of the library. The lighting, also just to mention, the lighting in many parts of the library is very energy efficient and not cost effective. So the lighting needs a complete upgrade as well within the library, just for visibility too. So when we talk about accessibility, as a public building, we really want to abide by the Americans with Disabilities Act. We want to make sure that we're accessible to people of all ages and all abilities. Our public bathrooms are currently not ADA compliant. Our staff bathrooms are not fully ADA compliant. The spacing in between shelves, the way in which the circulation desk is, the setup of our parking spots, the lighting, the signage, the way in which we have our technology set up, and also the size and setup of our study rooms. None of that is fully accessible to the entire range of our patrons. And so it's not only something that you have to think about as a community institution and as a neighbor of ARC, it's also something that we have to think about in the context of the gray wave and the fact that we have a rapidly aging population that may need some assistive either technology or construction or things to make things more comfortable for people. And our building currently doesn't take any of that into account. So another example, the meeting rooms. The meeting room that is the most popular meeting room is the community room. As you can see, it's a large and beautiful space. And so it's something that people enjoy booking, and we have a lot of very large programs in there. Unfortunately, the meeting room has limited storage space. It's not fully equipped to be a smart room, and none of our meeting rooms really are. So when we talk about running the full gamut of having meeting rooms that can accommodate all sorts of different meetings. So we have musical programs, but then we also have organizations, or we have boards, or we have recreational groups, or PTAs. We have all sorts of different groups using our spaces, and none of the meeting rooms are fully equipped to be up-to-date, smart meeting room spaces that have flexible usage. So our current community room is a very, very large room, but it only allows for one group use at a time. So that's great when you have a group that has 50 people, but if you have a group of 10, is that really an efficient use of the space? So parking was the number one issue that was identified by you, our patrons. It was rated as the number one issue for the future of the library. There are a number of community groups that use our library space, that have written to us, a number of patrons, in addition to the over 1,100 people who responded to our survey exercise. This was seen as a huge barrier to library use. And so this was something that we wanted to account for to improve in our future plans for the library. So what does this mean for us? So no more Band-Aids. We know that we need to have a significant building project. We know we haven't had a building project in over 30 years, and that we're going to need to do construction on the building. We don't want to continue to use Band-Aids indefinitely. It's not cost effective in the long run. We also know that the second floor concept is something that we wanted to expand. We currently have an existing second floor. It does not run the full length of the building, but it did allow for us to envision a second floor space. We also wanted to look at repurposing and reallocating existing space. And so keeping things that you love the same, like the size and shape of the community room, but then also to expand the parking lot. The Board of Trustees rejected all plans of a new location and building. They wanted to conserve resources and funds, and also to maintain our neighborhood feel, because that's one of the greatest positives of our current location. We're kind of in the downtown corridor. We're by schools and Franklin, and we're by houses of worship, and we're by the strip, not too far from the train station. We're by kind of like the downtown area. It's a great place to be, and people love to walk to our location. So it's something that the Board of Trustees really wanted to commit to preserving. So big question that we get asked: why does the current structure have to be torn down? To give you a background on it, building code has really changed a lot in New York State since the late 80s, early 90s. The existing structure, with the significant changes that we wanted to make, even with the minimum of replacing our roof and mechanical systems and gutting all of the walls in the library, there isn't going to be much left standing. And so replacing everything at once is more cost effective, time effective, it's safer, it's faster, and will definitely facilitate a more streamlined process. We also are on a very restricted residential lot. So our lot size is only about 0.7 of an acre. So when you think about what we can actually do on the land that we have, we don't have a lot of options. And so the idea of building a second floor became appealing, because it would enable us to square off and create kind of an energy efficient shape, as opposed to our current building shape, which is kind of oblong. And it would also allow us to maintain square footage, but use less of the lot, so that we could, in fact, add parking. And the reason that we wanted to add parking was, apart from all of the anecdotal evidence that we had heard, that was the number one thing that was indicated by respondents, that needed to be addressed with any building project that we did. So to give you an example, the plan went through and has gone through many, many stages. This is a earlier version of the plan that kept our current footprint, and simply at the bottom removed part of the building to allow for more parking. So this is the current building, first floor as is, with the part of the admin suite and part of the children's room cut off to create those 12 parking spots at the bottom. So if you look at all of the different shaded areas, the red, the blue, the peach, the purple, those are all indicating areas that would need significant structural support, slab removal, help or replacement of footings, walls that needed to be completely rebuilt. Because of the new requirements for being able to deal with seismic activity, most of our current structure would not comply with the current code. And so looking at this floor plan in the earlier stages as to what could actually be kept and what would need to be fixed and replaced, as you can see, it's almost the entire existing building that would need tremendous amounts of work. So when we talk about the entire structure being torn down, that is more cost effective than looking at this current image that you see in front of you right now and trying to keep or save certain pieces of the building instead. So currently we have a concept for the library. These are not full architectural plans. This is a concept and a rendering of potentially what the building could be like if it were transformed into a 2-floor structure. And so we do have, as you can see, reduced footprint on our lot. The parking lot is increased to 51 spaces, and we kept the community room the same size. It's very similar location because that's something that we got right. But we did address certain other programmatic issues that we've had. We know, for example, that our learning lab / tech room doesn't have enough space or the proper kind of space to do the cool stuff that we're doing. So we gave them more space. We also, Paul, I was going to say our architect and master planner helper, Paul Mays, is here as well. Do you want to walk us through some of the features of the conceptual design?
Sure, Eugenia, I'd be happy to do that. And thank you, everyone, for spending time to talk to us about this. Eugenia did an excellent job of covering the myriad of issues that we've addressed in the master planning process. And I just wanted to call your attention very quickly to two sort of primary areas. One is the physical infrastructure that we're dealing with in terms of the building and the site. And the other is, as a library architect, evaluating how services are provided to the community, not just because they've been provided this way in the past, but how are we going forward? This has become doubly important as we try to examine what a post-COVID world would look like. I often speak about the futures of libraries, and now the big question, of course, is how we're going to use them as we come back from this searing pandemic. And there's actually a good news situation that comes out of it, and that is that a lot of the library design ideas we've focused on and advocated for over the years are actually easy to reconcile with some of the new standards that relate to what we're finding in a more health conscious citizenry. So social distancing, creating individual niche spaces and territoriality, better HVAC systems, cleaner air, more efficient use of energy. All of these components are things we have been advocating in libraries for a while. The first and most important of the driving factors in the design, as Eugenia mentioned, that came out of all of the stakeholders interviews, the public meetings we facilitated, the conversations with staff as well as patrons and the general public, had to do with parking. And you can see from the plan she had just shown, we've grown parking on this site from 17 spaces to 51 spaces. We've tripled the amount of parking that's available on the site, all in that east lot. Now, of course, we were working with a fixed site, and so the only real viable option to gain new space and gain new parking meant reconsidering how the building would be used. And this is what Eugenia referred to. If we have to go up to make the best use of that space, that gets us into the question of structurally how we would be able to manage that. The drawings she showed with those various foundation and footing notes and structural notes were actually compiled by Ryan Biggs Associates, a very well-known structural engineer. They do most of our library projects throughout New England and New York State that we work on. And it was a very extensive analysis based on a geotechnical evaluation of the site. So the footprint you're looking at here is actually smaller than the footprint of the existing building. The square footage has increased from about 30,000 square feet to roughly 40,000 square feet, but the size of the building's footprint actually shrunk. It's now more evenly divided between a first and second floor. Franklin Ave is on the right side of the screen here. That's the gray strip with the sidewalk there, and the community room is on that side. And the parking is on the east at the bottom of the page primarily. One of the fundamental ideas of library design is to be able to create a threshold that we can block off and protect the library proper, even when the community room and the public restrooms and book sale areas might be used by the public. And you can see there's a pair of doors from the lobby into the library, basically from the peach into the green area, that allows us to create that separation so that the vestibule, the lobby area, the restrooms, the community room, the Paul Bahufsky gallery, and even the conference room on the west and the cafe lounge area, all of those could conceivably be accessible on Sunday mornings or even after hours after the library closes without compromising the entire library space. You'll notice that the entry is now closer to the parking rather than walking around the building to get to it. So that vestibule is on the east side, shortening the distance for people who have mobility challenges, minimizing the amount of travel they have to make from a handicapped space, for example. And I should add that the 51 spaces do not include street parking. That is strictly what is on site. As we come into the library, the first area is new materials, so new and popular and quick browsing. And you can see that the circulation desk is relatively central to the building. The stacks that you see in those areas where the computers and the new materials and media are lower stacks. They're mobile, adding to flexibility. We can shift them as the nature of collections and the nature of display changes without making any structural changes to the library. It also allows for sight lines from that circ desk and that help desk into all parts of the library. That centralization of supervision means that we can minimize the amount of staffing required to safely and efficiently serve the public. Safely, of course, that they can work with each other and mitigate threats, but as I say, efficiently as well, that patrons have access to assistance because that is what libraries do well. The circulation staff area is a back of house space in a pinkish color that is to the west of that. And you'll also see in green around the perimeter several SOHO or study rooms. These are small conference rooms. SOHO is an acronym for small office, home office. As we see the economy changing and more people working from home, there are still many situations where people would prefer to not have to have a meeting from their dining room table or from their living room laptop. A SOHO is actually a small conference room that can be reserved at the library. And it's wired, of course, for distance learning or remote meetings and so forth. It's also then very appropriate as a use for online students taking online college courses in the evening, for homeschoolers to use it as a study room during the day, for tutors to use it as a private tutoring space. So they're typically surrounded by glass. You see windows so that they can be supervised. Very flexible, small meeting spaces throughout. This is a common theme in many of our libraries. And I would add, it's a space that is almost non-existent in the existing Pearl River Public Library. As you go to the back of the building or head to the left on this drawing, you see around the perimeter, there are smaller groupings of seating areas, tables. Tables are typically two tops, that is that two people sit at them. They can be ganged together when collaborative learning or group meetings are taking place. But in keeping at two tops, we're maximizing that separation and the flexibility. Oftentimes one person sitting at a six-top table prevents other people from sitting there comfortably. We have a natural distance disposition built into us, and so it becomes inefficient. This allows us to create little niches, reading areas along the window areas around the perimeter of the building that are all separate and distinct from each other. And of course, we have perimeter HVAC improvements that allow for better circulation and cleaning of air. You also see at the far south, which is the left side of the screen, two more of those Soho lockable and reserved meeting rooms. On the east, which is the bottom of the screen here, the Pearl River Room has been reincarnated in conjunction with a local history display. Libraries are very good about telling the story of their community, and the Pearl River Room is a perfect opportunity to create a space that's flexible, not only for meetings and conference situations and presentations, but also as a local history repository and research area. And the Learning Lab has almost doubled in size as well, so that it now includes conference area, Learning Lab storage and office space, as well as flexible space to do the types of work that they do in there. That is a high priority and really a forward-thinking program that the library does now. So it's featured sort of front and center. I would add one other thing is that many people come now to the east side of the building and try to go in through the staff entry thinking it's the main entry of the building, in that the existing building essentially is not very intuitive about how you use it. The large community room, which faces Franklin Ave, is actually a large solid brick facade that faces out onto that street and doesn't give much of a clue to what's happening inside. So the modifications we're talking about, aside from adding technology and flexibility, has also to do with the idea of making a presence on the street and a dynamic space that adds to the neighborhood. This location really can't be beat, particularly once we add the parking, and we need to make it a safe building. The last thing I'd say about the main floor is one of the trends we're looking at is directional wayfinding or directionality. That is that we try to maintain distance separation with patrons by creating a flow of people into and out of the building where we're not constantly crossing each other. And so the divide from circ to the exit or from the entrance to the collection allows us to create a clockwise circulation around that space where people are not crossing each other. Again, a fundamental idea of sort of a post-COVID design practice. If we move to the next slide, this is the upper floor. Remember, we've consolidated the footprint, but now we're using the entirety of the second floor. In terms of height, the highest level of the roof on the most of the building is still no higher than the two gables that are east and west of the existing library building. To the west is a, looks like a multi-family residential unit, and to the east there's a modified cape with a shed dormer and then the funeral home. So the majority of this roof is actually no higher than the gables of those two-story buildings. There is above the mechanical space a penthouse that does come up a little higher, but only in that one area. So we think the massing of the building fits very well into the massing and context of the Franklin Avenue streetscape. As we come up the stairs from the lobby below or up the elevator to this upper lobby on the bottom right, you see. It brings us right outside a children's library. This, if you looked again at the charts where we had gathered data points from stakeholders and staff interviews and public input, the children's library, because of the number of families in Pearl River, is really one of the highest priorities. And that's confirmed when we look at circulation statistics and program attendance. The children's library is more than twice the size of the original library. It also includes a storytime activity room at the top of the page on the west that's dedicated to children's crafts and story hour, so that we are actually sequencing children from an activity to a story hour to a craft to the collection, or vice versa. All of that happens in one place, and that's a very intentional feature. There are 2 study rooms immediately adjacent to the children's area as well for supervision from children's staff. This allows them to create, even for younger kids, collaborative study or homework areas. One of the features we get a lot of attention for in most of our libraries is a family restroom directly in the children's library. So many times families, my own included, when they were younger, you had to make a decision with multiple siblings. Are we packing everybody up and dragging them out to the lobby because one has to use the restroom? Or do we have a safe space within the children's library that's a family-friendly restroom, changing tables and everything else? On the bottom of the screen, which is the east side of the building, you see a dedicated TeenYA area. This is very flexible with movable stacks that can be reconfigured, study tables and so forth. But it's also a flexible space that in the long term could become something else depending on usage patterns. The key to the entire building is that we're not limited by the original structure, but we have a broader space that we can reconstruct and reuse in different ways very easily going forward. So you see that in the 60s, when the building was originally built, 30 years later in the late 80s, early 90s, it got significant capital project. We're now 30 years later and we're looking at it again. The idea here is that we can adjust within the footprint going forward. And so it serves a longer useful lifespan. As we continue to the south of the building, there's an activities room there for adults or teens. It connects directly to the teens so that they can do programming from one space to another, but it can also be reserved for adult activities, as well as a conference seminar space upstairs. And then the southwest corner, which is the upper left, you see is primarily back of house administrative and staff work areas. One of the keys here is creating enough space for separation, workspace to workspace. Again, that's important not just for building and staff efficiency, but also for the health of the building and keeping distance separation as we go forward, whether it's this pandemic or any in the future. The other thing you see throughout the plan is a variety of different meeting spaces. So rather than dedicating a meeting space built for 120 people to a meeting of 10, we now have different options, and the staff through a reserve system can set up reserved meeting rooms or conference rooms throughout the building that are appropriately sized, and therefore we're not contaminating larger areas or inefficiently using space. In the meantime, that large community room is still a vital part of what the library does. Bringing people together in the community as a community center is a fundamental function of libraries. But even in the near future, as we start to come back and start to socialize again and start to do public in-person meetings, it's likely that we will have to steadily ramp up the attendance. And so the larger meeting room allows us to hold a meeting, even though we have fewer people in it, they can get more distance separation while we slowly increase the number of people coming back as herd immunity and vaccinations take place. So that's a quick run through of the overall building design. Believe me, a lot more has gone into that over several iterations in terms of trying to find an efficient, cost-effective way to use the existing site that has its own limitations, but provide the best service to the future of the library area. Eugenia, I don't know if you want to move on to the next slide.
Yep. Thank you, Paul.
You're very welcome.
Okay, so what are the project costs? So this is something that we want to go into a little bit detail about, because we've heard a lot of different numbers. So we want to make sure that we're being clear on what different aspects of the project are projected to cost. So the construction costs with contingencies total about $18.5 million. So that's talking about all of the actual construction costs, the fire sprinkler, the plumbing, the HVAC, the electrical construction costs, and the project design and escalation contingencies. The remainder of the costs are the soft costs. So the consultant fees, the project management fees, the asbestos and hazmat abatement. We do have asbestos, the borings, the legal fees, bond counsel fees, permits, insurance, moving expenses, rentals, testing and inspection, furniture, and an escalation contingency. So the total overall cost of the project is $23.8 million. So what does that cost taxpayers? So for the annual household cost, that would be $187. Which averages to about $15 a month or 51 cents a day. The actual tax impact, when that would be felt, another aspect of the project that is important for us to stress is the fact that the project is very future-based. And so the tax impact would be felt once the project actually started and was underway. And so this is not something that if and when voted upon, which we don't have a vote date at this time, if and when it's voted upon, that would be when the architectural drawing and mechanical drawing process would begin, which would be at least another year before we could embark upon the actual construction project. So are you getting grants? Are you fundraising? The library has earmarked monies from its capital fund towards the project. We also have received one SAM grant already for the project. We would actively pursue each and every grant possible, including New York State Library construction grants, which is money specifically set aside to fund public library construction projects. And since I've been director, this is something that we certainly have made an institutional priority across the board, and we've received many grants for different programs, for different to support different collections. So this would be no different. We can't, ask, we get asked a lot, can you ask for corporate sponsors? Can Microsoft or Google or Apple help? And certainly they can, but in order for them to help, we do have to have a project. And so at this point, we until there's taxpayer approval, there is no project. So that would be something that we would embark upon after the project, when it would become a reality. So what is the renovated and expanded building proposed to look like? So we have a couple of renderings of what potentially the building could look like. One of the best parts about the second floor concept is the fact that in the front of the building, we already have the second floor height. So the front of the building already, the height of it looks the way it would look if we added a second floor because of those high ceilings that we have. So here's one artist rendering of what it would look like from street side.